So I've wanted to make this video for a really long time just to kind of express my thoughts and criticisms of Dragon Ball Super. And I want to say that I really did want to enjoy this story. I wanted to see Goku and everybody go on another adventure. But ultimately, there's just so many things wrong with it that I just can't enjoy the overall product. And before we really get into the video, I just want to say that I realize Dragon Ball Z is not a perfect product, and even the original Dragon Ball is not a perfect product. I do have some problems with them, and they all have some of the same problems, especially like the end of Z has a lot of the same problems that Dragon Ball Super does. But overall, I don't think Dragon Ball Z and the original Dragon Ball suck, despite them having their own problems, and Super definitely does, because Super's problems are just too big to ignore. I do like some parts of Dragon Ball Super, and like I said earlier, I wanted to love it, but I just can't because it really just doesn't hold up to the same standards set by the first two series, and it just makes way too many mistakes. Go watch Dragon Ball Deliverance if you think Super is any good. It's infinitely more engaging and has more passion than Super ever did, and that's honestly probably because the main motivation behind Dragon Ball Super is more money, and Deliverance was made just because some OG fans really wanted to give a good Dragon Ball story. So I think it's pretty obvious that Dragon Ball Super is a cash grab. I mean, they want to sell merchandise, mangas, video games, movie tickets, and they made the series less mature in order to appeal to a younger audience, which helps with all of that. I think the Battle of Gods arc was a decent start for Dragon Ball Super. I mean, it doesn't do anything egregiously bad, but it also doesn't blow me away. I only had a few problems with it. So obviously the animation was terrible, but you can just watch the movie to avoid that. And I also don't like Gohan's character design in the anime version, which is why I also prefer the movie. But yeah, Gohan's character design is something we'll be talking about a lot in this video. And also, what happened to Videl? I really liked her character in Z. Why did she just turn into a generic, stereotypical stay-at-home mom? Honestly, I really would have preferred the same character that we got in the Boo arc. I thought Videl was really cool, but now it's just kind of disappointing like everything else in this series. Also, I would have preferred to see Super Saiyan 4 make a comeback rather than the beginning of us trying to get every color in the crayon box for our transformations in this series. And before anyone says that Super Saiyan transformations were just color swaps too, you need to consider that we also had other cool transformations in Dragon Ball Z, like Boo and Cell's absorptions, or Frieza's transformations that are very iconic and insanely cool. Also, the Super Saiyan forms were treated with much more respect than any of the forms introduced in Dragon Ball Super, aside from when Goten and Trunks transformed in the Buu Saga, which honestly that's bullshit, and that's one of my biggest problems with Dragon Ball Z. So I wish they didn't add that in there. But yeah, just in general, Dragon Ball Z treats its transformations with a lot more respect than Dragon Ball Super does. And the Super Saiyan God form being unlocked by a ritual does make it feel cheaper than other transformations, whether you want to admit it or not. But fusions have that same implication where, a character gets more power than they otherwise would have had, and they didn't really earn it. But I've never had a problem with fusion, so I can't be too mad at the way that the God form is achieved in this arc. But I would rather it be unlocked through training, though. And also, I don't think it was the worst decision to have Goku lose to Beerus, because it essentially gives us a goal for the rest of the series, even though in hindsight, it seems like Goku and Vegeta are never surpassing him. But that's not something we can blame this arc for, and despite the God form losing in its first fight, it could have still been respected if the other arcs didn't abandon it, but that gets us into our next topic, the Frieza Saga. The anime version of this fight falls victim to the same animation problems of the previous arc, so again, I prefer the movie, even though you'd miss out on Goku and Vegeta training with Whis. Gohan's character design in this arc is absolutely terrible, and I don't think anybody disagrees with me on that. That jumpsuit is just so bad. I hate looking at it. I can't believe that they would do Gohan so dirty. And I get that he doesn't like to fight, but I hate that he continues to cycle through the same character arc. He should know by now that it's his responsibility to protect the Earth because he is the strongest fighter. Also, why is Master Roshi fighting? There's no way he's anywhere close to as strong as Yamcha, and I know Yamcha always gets disrespected, but this honestly just crosses the line, and I think the only reason why they did this was just because Master Roshi is a more popular character than Yamcha, and, you know, they gave him a costume redesign, so, you know, he probably stands a better chance at selling more merchandise and stuff like that than Yamcha does, but just narratively speaking, it doesn't make sense for Roshi to be fighting in Yamcha's place, because Roshi honestly hasn't been relevant since the Demon King Piccolo saga in Dragon Ball, so I just think it's really stupid that he's here instead of Yamcha. I also wish Gotenks was more respected in this arc. He makes it in for a joke, but that's about it. I mean, he was able to fight Super Buu, so he should at least be able to give Frieza a decent fight. I think it would be really cool if we got Gotenks Super Saiyan 3 versus like second form Frieza or something. And also, there's no seriousness around Gotenks' character, and that's not just with his character, but it's also just with Dragon Ball Super in general. And especially in this arc, the lack of seriousness just really takes away any kind of tension from the atmosphere. Like when Piccolo makes, his sacrifice for Gohan, it really doesn't hook you in the same way it did, in the Saiyan saga, and it really doesn't feel like somebody just died. And I just think that they really just dropped the ball by not having, that tension in the atmosphere, and it makes everything feel a lot cheaper than it should. Also, the Golden Frieza form and Super Saiyan Blue are two of the things that I hate most about this arc. There's no reason why Frieza couldn't have gotten a transformation that, morphs his body in the same way his other forms did. In Dragon Ball Z, when Frieza transforms into his second form, you honestly, kind of feel scared for Vegeta, Gohan, and Krillin, because that second form is really menacing, and you know that they have absolutely no chance to fight Frieza. Whereas Frieza's new transformations, they just feel really lazy and they're not intimidating, and I would have loved to see something like Cooler's final form, and I think that would have made this arc a lot better. And unlike a lot of people, I don't mind Frieza's power-up. I mean, he was able to fight a Super Saiyan without any training at all, so it's not the most, unearned power-up that we've ever seen. If you think about it, in the Namek Saga, Vegeta went from losing to Recoome to fighting First Form Frieza with one Zenkai boost. So Frieza's power-up isn't that bad in my opinion, and it doesn't affect the way that I look at this arc. And also, the introduction of Super Saiyan Blue really just kind of throws Super Saiyan God in the trash. So in Dragon Ball Z, it took years of training to master the Super Saiyan form, obviously. And then after that, they ascended to Super Saiyan 2, and it kind of allowed Super Saiyan to develop the mystique that it has today. Imagine if we got Goku transforming to Super Saiyan on Namek, and then when Trunks shows up, he's a Super Saiyan 2 and says he can't beat the androids. That's basically the pacing that Super takes with its transformations, and it makes him feel worthless. I also really hate that Vegeta doesn't get to win versus Frieza here. And Whis stepping in and rewinding time takes what little tension the series had before, it takes it away completely. I think this was probably one of the worst mistakes they made with the series as a whole. If you're going to introduce gods like Beerus, Whis, the Grand Priest, the Kais, and Zeno, you have to make them either too weak to save the Z Fighters, or just have them refuse to interfere, because otherwise we know nothing bad can happen, and that's a recurring theme with Dragon Ball Super. In Dragon Ball Z, King Kai and Supreme Kai were never able to save the Z Fighters. They were just able to help them out a little bit with their training and stuff. So let's get into the next arc. The Destroyer God Tournament is honestly just boring. I feel no emotional involvement with it at all when I watch it, and the worst thing that can happen is if Universe 7 loses the tournament, the main cast is moved to Universe 6. Which honestly, it could be interesting if the writers were any good, so it really just doesn't feel like there's any stakes in this arc. which again adds to the problem of there being no tension in Dragon Ball Super. I also really don't like how characters are treated in this arc, specifically Majin Buu and Piccolo. Also, where the fuck is Gohan? I really don't like how Majin Buu is excluded from the tournament. I think that it would be really cool if Majin Buu was a consistent fighter in Dragon Ball Super. His character design is awesome. He has really unique abilities, and so his fights would be really fun. But not only do they mistreat Majin Buu, they mistreat Piccolo, and I just really miss when he was a relevant character. He was such a badass in the Android Saga. And they really just shit on his character way too bad at this arc. I also really hate Monaka. I think that it would have been better served if they just gave us another cool top tier fighter from Universe 7. It would have added to the world building aspect a little bit, and it would have given Goku and Vegeta a new rival. So I think it would have just been better than what we got. Whereas Monaka, it's really just, I get tired of the jokes in Dragon Ball Super because there's so many of them, and like I said, there's just no tension in this series. And when you give me a character like Monaka, it really feels like you're trolling me. Like, you put him in a wrestling suit, you give him big nipples, and then you say, he's stronger than Goku and Vegeta, and he ends up not being. So I really wish they would have just given us a legit character instead of a joke in this arc. And yeah, so that's one thing I hate about this arc. Also, the Universe 6 character designs really suck. Frost and Hit look okay, but none of them are really intimidating in the way that, Frieza, Cell, or Buu were. I mean, I guess Hit's okay, but he's really not that great of a villain, honestly. Just, think about when Frieza first transformed, or, the eerie feeling you get watching Piccolo walk through a ghost town with Cell lurking, or when Super Blue blew up that guy, on the ridge by, he basically popped him like a balloon, you really don't feel that intimidation from not only just the villains in this arc, but the villains in Dragon Ball Super as a whole. So, I feel like they could have done a lot better of a job with the character designs in general in this arc, and the new characters that they introduced, and giving them a backstory and stuff like that. Also, the concept of a Saiyan from Universe 6 fighting against Goku and Vegeta is really cool. But Cabba's character design and the cheap way that he gains Super Saiyan really ruins it. Why can't we have a Saiyan who achieves Super Saiyan by fighting his own battles in his universe? I feel like that would have been a lot better than what we got. Alright, so moving on to the Goku Black Saga. This arc has an amazing introduction, and it reminds me a lot of the old Dragon Ball that I love, and it's honestly probably my favorite part of Dragon Ball Super. But somehow, to me, this is the worst arc in the entire series. I mean, the ending of this arc is the main reason why I can't accept Dragon Ball Super as a sequel to Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. It's just way too bad. It's a really shitty ending. Trunks' entire timeline being erased, and him now living in a universe with another version of himself. It's just weird. And also the tone at the ending of this arc is all wrong. It's like the directors are trying to make you feel like it's a happy send-off, when in reality things honestly went as bad as they could have gone, and now an entire timeline filled with people in Trunks' entire planet has been erased. So that's kind of that's horrifying, and the fact that they're trying to make it feel like a happy send-off, knowing all of the stuff that happened before, it's just so stupid, man. I mean, I really feel like these guys have no idea what they're doing. They feel disorganized, honestly. And I think that's an accurate description of the people who make this show. And maybe I could have accepted the ending of this arc, if they put future Trunks in our main timeline and made him a permanent member of the cast. That honestly, to me, could have saved this arc, and honestly could have saved my opinion of Dragon Ball Super. But that's just another missed opportunity. I like the manga version of this arc a lot better than the anime version. There's no Super Saiyan Rage. Instead of Zamasu becoming the universe, he just multiplies, which is a lot better and it's a lot cooler. I also like that Goku Black gets Super Saiyan before he unlocks Rose. I think that's a cool form, obviously judging by my profile picture. And once again, Gohan is nowhere to be found in this arc. So let's get into the Tournament of Power. I think it's the best arc in the Dragon Ball Super anime up to this point, but it still has a lot of problems. Once again, I prefer the manga version of this arc to the anime version, mainly because Gohan's given a bigger role, and I really like his fight with Kefla. The power creep in this arc is way too much. Like, Roshi, he's fighting again instead of Yamcha, which makes no sense because Roshi shouldn't even be stronger than Raditz. And Android 17 is just way too strong. Like, don't get me wrong, I love him. I think he's a great character, but you can't make him strong enough to stand up against God tier fighters. It just really doesn't make any sense, and there's not a good explanation for it. Also, Piccolo is embarrassed in this arc again, and before Dragon Ball Super Superhero came out, it seemed like, we'd never really get back to the Piccolo that fought Goku, Cell, Android 17, or Frieza. And honestly, I liked the Blue Evolution form. I thought it was a nice callback to Super Vegeta. And Ultra Instinct was really cool too. I think the reception overall of that form was really positive. And the moments that we get with Ultra Instinct were really cool and honestly on par with some of the moments we got in Dragon Ball Z. So I do like the transformations introduced in this arc. But I'm just kind of tired of all the tournaments. Like, it's just something about a regulated fight that just doesn't give me the kind of atmosphere I'm looking for. I mean, it does do a decent job at giving us some tension by threatening universal erasure, but it still just feels really immature, especially because of the presence of the two Zenos. I think Caulifla and Kale are decent characters, and I like that they fuse. But the back-tingling explanation we get for Super Saiyan transformations is just really stupid, and I wish it wasn't included, and I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. And also, the fact that Goku uses Super Saiyan Blue on people like Krillin, it just destroys any semblance of respect that we could have for the God forms, because now everyone is strong enough to warrant using it. Also, Majin Buu is excluded from this arc, which I really hate because, again, I love his character. He's strong enough to be a respectable fighter and, a good support character throughout the series, but they just never use him. Also, Jiren is just not the most interesting villain, to say the least. So, for the Broly movie, I genuinely have nothing bad to say. It was really fun to watch, and everybody loved it. Everybody loved the animation. And from what I've seen, it's the most consistently liked thing about Dragon Ball Super. The only criticism I've heard is that Broly powers up way too fast, which is fair, but other than that, I think the movie's really good, and that honestly doesn't bother me at all. So, the Moro arc is honestly my favorite arc in Dragon Ball Super for sure, but that's not really saying much. I think some things are weird, like when Moro fuses with the Earth or when Goku gets a Ki avatar. And I also really dislike that Miras doesn't end up dying because it does make his sacrifice feel really cheap. They honestly didn't need to bring him back, and I thought, he had a good ending to his story. And it was a good way to make it feel like Dragon Ball has some consequences and that everything's not completely safe. But on the other hand, I do love the introduction of Moro. I think his character design is really cool, and it's exactly what I'm looking for in a Dragon Ball story. His energy absorption ability makes him really dangerous, and I also like the gore that's shown in this arc. For the first time in a while, I felt the same tension that I felt watching Dragon Ball Z, and Moro putting a hole in Goku's chest really hooked me in and solidified this arc as my favorite in Dragon Ball Super. I don't like the Granola arc as much as I do the Moro arc, but I think it's a solid addition to the story. I like Granola and Gas's character designs a lot, and I think the fights are pretty cool. It's definitely not the best Dragon Ball arc, but it doesn't do anything that I hate, and it gives me several things that I like. Changing Bardock is the only thing that's a little controversial, and I do prefer the old version, but I don't think it's terrible, and my standards for a Dragon Ball Super story are very low, so in my mind, this is a good arc. I don't like that Granola just wishes for more power with the Dragon Balls, even though it cuts his life short. And I also wish they would stop giving Frieza color palette swaps and make his new transformation more like the old ones. They were so much more badass. So for the final arc, we have Dragon Ball Super Superhero. I have a few problems with it, but overall I think it's fun. And it's definitely a lot better than how Dragon Ball Super started. So my main problem with this arc is that we don't get to see Perfect Cell, and I think the fans would have really enjoyed that. I really can't believe they missed that opportunity because, I mean, he's honestly the only Z villain that hasn't made a comeback in some kind of way. So I really think they should have brought him back. I mean, Beast Gohan versus Perfect Cell would have been a really cool fight, and not to mention, a great villain it's just important for a story like this. You know, Spider-Man, it wouldn't be as good without the Green Goblin, and Batman wouldn't be as good without the Joker. So, you know, Perfect Cell making a comeback, you know, to fight Gohan would have been a lot more interesting than what we got. And another problem I have is that I really don't think Gohan deserved to get his Beast transformation. Like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If he could perform that transformation at the level he was at, why didn't he do it against Bootanks? Is he stupid? And while I love that Piccolo becomes relevant again, I just wish they didn't use the Dragon Balls to do it. Other than that, though, I think Superhero is okay. But yeah, those are my main criticisms of Dragon Ball Super. I know a lot of you guys are going to agree with me on this. In fact, I think the majority of Dragon Ball fans would agree with me on a lot of the criticisms that I've given out in this video. You know, obviously some people aren't going to agree with me, but, you know, I think most people will. But yeah, if you guys like this video, just give it a thumbs up. Hopefully I'll have some more content coming out soon. And yeah, y'all have a good one.